Welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Unlimited, where we believe you can live the lifestyle you want in an unlimited purpose. So I think we got some controversial views today on real estate or different types of real estate that maybe you and I don't see eye to eye on.
Well, and that's okay to have, but I'll tell you what, Julie, I'll tell you one thing. You know me for 22 years, 23 years now. I've been doing the same thing, and I'm more of an opinion to stick with what's working. Now, you also know, we look at different things, do different things and all this, but specifically, I'm the opinion, like, you figure something out, especially when it comes to real estate. Like, there's a lot of shining objects up there. There's a lot of techniques and strategies. But for me personally, single families, fix and flip, wholesales, that's like been my bread and butter. I know we're getting more into the creative, but I just thought it'd be interesting. Like, what's you're gotten into land stuff. And I could tell you, to me, like, if houses are here, land is right there, like in that house next door. I don't even see any correlation.
Yeah. I mean, I do. Like with land, with buying raw land, it all goes back to this that, you know what, they aren't making any more land.
Okay.
Right? So to me, land or raw land has only always went up and up and up and up in years to come. I've also seen lots of people, very important people in my life, who literally by the time they were leaving this earth, they left their family multi millions of dollars because they invested in land, right? Like, it's not, like, for me, land is not about, like, I don't flip land. I flipped a couple pieces of land. Yeah, you're going to make maybe a little bit of money. What I'm talking about is holding land, holding large tracts of land, where, like, for instance, Hoyt Robinson is this gentleman that lives in a town that I live in called Dahlonega.
Okay.
I wanted to buy this 4.5 acres from him.
Okay.
And he was the first person to ever teach me a little bit about land, and he also gave me the opportunity to buy owner finance from him.
Okay.
So whenever I was asking him, we were walking this piece of land, he was like 87 at the time. He said, he was telling me about how he got all this land. And I'm like, well, yeah, that must be easy because you only paid this for it. Okay. Like, you only paid this amount for it. He said, did you think that amount of money was a little bit of money to me 50 years ago?
Right.
But he, like, literally owned an entire road, both sides of the road.
Okay.
And then he just sorted out little pieces, sold it. And, like, it turned out to be the highest profitable land in that entire county. And his whole entire family, all of his children, can literally retire whenever he died because of what he left them.
Well, this is the one thing about land that always kind of turned me off about it. You hear about stories like that, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, there's probably 6,000 other pieces of land around here, right? Mm-hmm. You don't hear those stories. So it just seems like it's like hearing about the one guy that makes it out of your little town and becomes a professional basketball player. But what about all the people that bought land that aren't making money on it, that are now stuck with it? I mean, I've always looked at this. I always look at things from a worst-case scenario. House, you buy it wrong, there's always a demand. There's a demand for a renter to get in there so you could cash flow it. Maybe you could not make as much on it. You could drop the price. But to me, it seems like if you make a wrong decision on land, you're screwed. Like, not only are you going to potentially lose money, the way I look at it, you may not even have any buyers for it.
I mean, I disagree. Because you're looking at it like, how can I make money quickly? In 5 years or less, let's say.
Okay.
Land, you've got to look at it long term. What is it worth later? But you might also say, well, I have to pay taxes on that land, right? Or I've got my money. Got to carry it. I've got money sitting in land.
Right.
Other members of my family bought land years ago and put cows on it.
Okay.
Right? Like, you might not think, okay, well, they made lots of money off of livestock. Now the land is worth so much that they're going to make more money selling the land than running a farm. You know, so a lot of people, like back then to now, which is really different now, is they bought land based on the fact that they could use it for farming purposes. So that was like a business for them.
Right.
Right? So the land was the business. And so now that it's many years later, that's not the case. I mean, I'll tell you, the land that I was looking to buy, the 140 acres that I just quite couldn't make happen,
Right.
I know I'm going to kick myself 30 years from now by not figuring it out. But it's like, you know, I think I do like buying land, large tracts of land. Maybe small little lots inside of a
Right.
city, you're not going to do well. But if you're anywhere near a metropolitan city or even a medium-sized town, the land's going to always go up in value. I mean, it might go up, down, up, down, up, down. But if you look at it over 30, 40 years, it's going to go way up.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that because that's always been my contention about land. House, you buy a house, let's say you got to sit on it. Let's say you made a wrong decision and you got to sit on this thing, right? You don't got to run a business out of that house. You put a tenant in there, that tenant sends you a check once a month, and and they say out of sight, out of mind. But you're right, for that land to do something for you, you literally got to run a business out of it. And you're kind of limited. You're right, livestock, how many people do livestock? You know, I guess you could build something on it, but now you're getting away from land. You're
Well,
getting
that's more
back to
commercial, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a different kind of a business. I don't know. It just always scared me that if you make the wrong decision, you could be stuck with it. And really, here's the question. What was the gentleman's name? Hoyt? Mm-hmm. Here's the real question that I don't bet you'll never ask him. How much does he have into it, like over the 30 years he's had it? How much taxes has he paid? How much is insurance has he paid? How many, you know what I mean? And I don't, all the expenses. So I know he's making money now, no question, right? But how long? 30 years is a pretty darn long-term play. And here's the other thing. How big of a tract of land do you need to truly, truly make some money? You know what I mean? I guess
if you're farming, you need a pretty good bit.
You need a pretty good bit.
Well, like if you look like in Louisiana and Texas, there's big sprawling lands, like I met another guy because I live part-time in Louisiana. And this blowed my mind. He owned like 900 acres. That's huge.
That is huge.
Huge. Half of it's crawfish ponds, half of it's livestock, some of it's soybeans, some of it's this. And they all work with each other. So it really is a business. So it's just you're not finding these opportunities as the years go on. The opportunities that were there for that, like 30 years ago, are going away. Because what's happened is those farming lands have now been sold to developers, and now there's houses there.
Right.
So it's now, the way I look at it, is because so much of it's gotten bought up and there's so much not going into farming anymore.
Right.
Those large tracts of land are going to be very, very valuable in the future because there's not as much as there was back then.
Yeah, and see, that leads me to the next question. When we deal with houses, we deal people in trouble. You know, they face a job situation, a health situation, a divorce situation. It seems like with land, you got a lot more sophisticated. Now, I might be wrong. Don't you have a lot more sophisticated sellers, which means a lot less problems on that side of the equation? I mean, aren't you getting into people that, like you said, own them for 30 years? They're not desperate, or am I wrong?
They're not desperate, right? But they also don't, a lot of these people don't want to leave things to their children either for them to deal with. They don't want to leave capital gains on the table. I'll tell you, to me, land's actually easier to buy than a house.
You think?
I know so. Based off the fact that if you look at creative financing, right? Mm-hmm. Most creative financing can be difficult to do on a home. And talking about people to really get really good at it. There's so many small details.
Right.
Every piece of land I've ever bought has always been bought through owner finance. And because they don't need money right away, they're willing to take that long-term cash flow to purchase that said property. So for me, it's easier if your game is to buy it and hold it.
Well, and that leads me to maybe the final question. is there a short-term play in land? I mean, short of you just walk into something unbelievable, incredible, and the guy's been sitting in for 30 years, just absolutely lost his mind, can't figure out what he's got, which I find those deals to be few and far in between. Is there a short-term play for someone like myself who does like the short-term play? Is there potential short-term play at the land?
There is. There is. Now, when you're talking about short-term plays, you've got to look at sewer. You've got to look at water. It's a big deal to develop a property that doesn't have sewer running to the property already, doesn't have city water. So let's say you're going to buy land and you're going to buy a house.
Okay.
Right? If you don't already have these two systems running to it, you're either going to have to work with the county and pay for it to come there, or you're going to have a septic tank and or a well.
Okay.
Well, a septic tank can be anywhere between $4,000 and $10,000 depending on the size of the home.
Right.
A well can be $4,000 to $7,000 depending on how deep they've got to go.
Okay.
Also, you got to know, does the land perk? Is it able to have a sewer? Is it able to have all of these things there? Does the county allow you to do what you want to do with that piece of land? Because is it zoned rural and now you're trying to make it residential? So I think land developers, and I'm by no means an expert in this, that is a subset, and those land developers make a significant amount of money. I do think it's a little bit harder. There's a little bit more to learn.
I would agree.
Than like with a single family home. I mean, because when you could mess up and you could mess up big, because then it gets into traffic counts, it gets into this.
Right.
So I've just dabbled into it a little bit. You can. I mean, heck, I got that 4.5 acres, owner finance, paid it off, and I kind of thought like I'd keep it. But I got in a scenario where I wanted to buy this other house.
Right.
I bought that other house owner finance and traded my land as the down payment.
Right.
So I don't know that I've got it all the way figured out, but I'm definitely not against like land investors. You can wholesale land too, like small little lots. You just got to get it cheap enough, like 50 cents on the dollar. So if you get it cheap enough, you can make money, but you can't be paying like 75, 80% on the dollar and do a quick turn. It's more of a long-term play.
Well, I said final question, but I do have a follow-up to that. And this is the other thing that kind of concerns me all the time, why I stay away from land. Isn't it safe to say, and I know you've sold some or traded some at least, isn't it safe that the buyer's pool is much, much smaller? I mean, on our wholesale flips, it's not uncommon to throw at MLS and have multiple offers within a couple hours. And you're right, it's not really a short-term play the way I consider it to be short-term play. But even kind of a mid-term play, isn't your pool of buyers like dwindle down to how many people actually want a piece of land?
Well, yeah, because number one, like if you want to buy a piece of land, right? And you want, like me, like the house I'm buying, it's not a huge tract, it's 6 acres. Mm-hmm. If I wanted to build that same house that was already there on that 6 acres, let's just pretend that house wasn't there. It's going to be a lot harder for me to get a loan, a construction loan, and get all the permits and get all the water, the sewers, the this on that land than it is for me to just buy one that already exists.
Right.
Also, the thing is, when you're talking big tracts of land, that's also big money. It's not just that the buyer pool's small, it's you've got to be willing to spend millions of dollars on something that you're not going to see right away. And even though you might be able to make a ton of money later on, it's just a lot of people don't have the ability to sit on $2, $4, $5 million over 20 years.
That's right. Because your financing ability goes down too, doesn't it?
Well, it's cash. I mean, generally, like even that.
Or cash, which means
even the land on that, they are not even wanting you to take a loan. They want you to owner finance because they avoid capital gains.
Right. I got you. Well, look, I think the best thing we could say is we could agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. I absolutely see your point. I know you see my point because we do a ton of houses together.
And I've messed up and lost plenty of money on land before.
Well, and we've done that on houses too, so that is not an exclusive thing. But I think the key is this: no matter what you decide to do, whether it's after watching this or doing some more due diligence or really just figuring out where's your head at, I think the key is be smart about it. Mm-hmm. Have a reason to do it. Don't just do land because we said do land. And don't just get into, let's say, fix and flips just because we do fix and flip. Figure out what your specific individual needs and goals are, and according to what your needs and goals are, somewhat what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are also, put all those two things together, and I think ultimately, you will figure out what the right technique and strategy for you as a real estate investor is.
Absolutely.